Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee, reflecting on the biggest global events of the past 7 days with a distinguished panel of international correspondents. We are looking at a week that's seen another changing of the guard of the French government, the will he stay or will he go moment for the Prime Minister François Bayrou was as predictable as the bad Barbara Cartland novel. Spoiler alert, he was voted out on Monday, resigned on Tuesday, and that was the end of François Bayrou. Enter Sébastien Lecornu, who, don't worry, we'll explain, the fifth Prime Minister in just 2 years was just in time to face Wednesday's nationwide protests over the government's austerity measures. We're going to discuss if the man former President Sarkozy nicknamed Lecornichon can get France out of a political pickle. And it's been a dark week of political violence in the US with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a close ally of President Trump, who was shot dead by a sniper as he spoke to students at Utah Valley University. The 31-year-old conservative activist and podcaster was credited with galvanizing the youth vote towards the MAGA movement. Prove me wrong was his signature slogan. Hard-right commentators speak of US being at war, of Republicans being unable to coexist with liberals. We'll assess the rhetoric and weigh up the significance of the moment.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
And it's been a week that's seen an unprecedented Israeli attack on the Hamas negotiating team, a supposed safe space during ongoing talks in Doha. 6 members of Hamas were assassinated in targeted strikes with sovereign territory breached. The US says it knew in advance, while European allies and Gulf neighbours are outraged, accusing Benjamin Netanyahu of sabotaging diplomacy and killing any hope of a peace deal in Gaza.
The strikes that Israel carried out in Doha yesterday. They violate Qatar's sovereignty. They do nothing to secure the peace that the UK and so many of our allies are committed to.
And joining me on tonight's panel, we have a full house in the studio. It is standing room only at our round table, and fittingly, because we have a knight amongst us tonight. Let's welcome Amar Abed Rabot, renowned French-Syrian photojournalist, a French Knight of Art and Letters. Welcome back to the programme.
Thank you.
It is great to see you, and I would like to know, because you're always off on deployment, have you been able to recharge your batteries at all? Has it been non-stop this summer?
Oh, it's been a very busy summer, but I've been recharging the batteries. I used to have a boss in Paris who used to say, "You photographers don't need vacation. You're always on vacation." So
I'll take it. Well, it's great to have you here as always, Amar. Let's bring in as well Peter Conradi, the Europe editor of the Sunday Times, author of Who Lost Russia? From the Collapse of the USSR to Putin's War on Ukraine. Peter's career as a foreign correspondent began with Reuters in Moscow in the late 80s. He's also the author of Hitler's Piano Player and co-author of The King's Speech, which was adapted into a multi-Oscar winning film. It is great to have you with us, Peter.
Pleasure.
And it's a good week to talk to you because amidst the barrage of Russian drones and missiles into Ukraine, the spillover into Poland, I want to know what you make of this quote we've heard this week. This is the other Donald Tusk, talking about the situation, saying this: "It's the closest it's been to open conflict since the Second World War." How do you read events this week?
Yeah, I mean, extraordinary. Just the sheer number of drones that came across the border. And as usual, the Russian line is, it was a mistake. Some kind of a mistake, a multiple mistake. Very alarming indeed. I mean, it certainly appears to have been an attempt to test NATO defences. NATO defences held up, but they were using a lot of very, very expensive kit to shoot down some very, very cheap drones.
We're seeing, and if ever there's a good time to read about the rise of Putin, your book, Who Lost Russia? Tell us about the journey you take us on and then the history you go through there.
Yeah, it's essentially a study of relations between Russia and the West since the collapse of the Soviet Union, a sort of fairly straightforward chronological description of what happened and, in a sense, why the early promise of a new relationship after the end of communism came to nothing. I wrote it in the run-up to the war, in fact, in 2017, after the first Russian incursion to Ukraine, and then obviously rather hurriedly updated it after they came back in 2022 for an even more devastating attack on the country.
As I say, it is a fascinating read and recommend it to anybody who tries to or wants to understand. It's a disturbing read as well, given what we're reading about. But great to have you with us, Peter.
Thank you.
And let's also bring in a friend of the programme as well, Richard Worley. Great to see you, Richard. He is the Europe correspondent for the Swiss-German publisher Blick and author of The Ball of Illusion, What France Believes and What the World Sees. Now, an interesting moment for French politics this week, but also I want to talk about your newsroom. I hear a little birdie tells me since the start of this month, your bosses are looking at how to incorporate AI into journalism.
True. We're trying our best to bring in AI and to see not if it can replace journalists, but if it can really help us in different tasks, especially editing. So the difference with other media maybe, because we are, because we are Swiss, maybe more prone to technology, is we are open to it. We say it. In France, for example, it's very controversial. You've got a number of media outlets who are using AI but don't dare to say it. So we're putting it straight on the table. Yes, we will try to rely on AI. At the moment, it's creating some difficulties in the newsroom because AI is not perfect. That's piece of news that we should all remember. AI is not perfect, but it can help. So I'm going to update you on whether it works or not. At the moment, it's too early to say.
And it's too early to know, for example, if we read Blick, would there be an article that said AI generated?
Yeah. Every time we're going to use AI either on a photograph or on a story, we're going to indicate, to put it, to mention it. It's already the case for photo. Now, if you ask my personal worry, I'm afraid that as far as stories are concerned, maybe we will tend to forget the help of AI very soon. That's the problem. So we need to be very, very vigilant. But I believe it can bring good stuff. And we will see. But the book I just completed this summer on the US, which is called in French, Cette Amérique qui nous déteste, America that hates us, has not been written with AI.
Okay, it is good to know. Great to have you here. Let's also bring in to complete the lineup and welcome back Mark Burley. Evening, Mark. Seasoned foreign correspondent for AFP. Seasoned sounds very much better than veteran. It's kind of a younger vibe to it, doesn't it?
Seasoned sounds like I've earned the grade.
And you first joined in Paris, on the Paris desk, back in 1997. Since then, Tehran, Brussels, Sao Paulo, and very good time to ask you about events, extraordinary events in Brazil this week, the 27-year sentencing.
I was rather looking forward to discussing it,
yes,
but it's not one of the...
No, it is. Well, it is for the intro. I would like to know your thoughts on this, because Jair Bolsonaro, he calls it a witch hunt, guilty of a coup, a plot, guilty of an assassination plot. I'm guessing, given your time in Brazil, you followed the twists and turns. What do you make of kind of the political moment there right now?
Like so much of Brazil, I mean, it really is. It's the legal and political spheres meshing together in a big way, which quite often happens in Brazil. But I got to say, from where I'm sitting in Paris, what really interests me now is to sort of see how Donald Trump reacts to this. He's already slapped tariffs on it, so he's using his tariffs as a political cudgel on Brazil. So it's no longer sort of talking about we're being unfairly done by. I'm really interested to see what Washington does now that a Trump ally has been convicted and sentenced to prison.
They are threatening a response, and accordingly was the quote. Do you sense there'll be activity, movements, marches on the streets? Or could we be at another tipping point that we're seeing in the US? Too early to say.
I'm not going to be a journalist who gets into tipping points, but yes, I think there'll definitely be demonstrations. And I think, Bolsonaro, you don't forget that the Brazilian Congress is Bolsonarist. We've got Lula, who, is president, but he's got a Congress that is largely pro-Bolsonaro. So, yeah, the story's not finished.
Well, Burley, great to have you with us as well. OK, let's turn to the start of the week here in France. 7:30 p.m. local time on Monday in Paris was when the results of the vote of confidence in the French Prime Minister came through at the National Assembly overwhelmingly. A vote of no confidence in François Bayrou. He'd called the vote asking for clarity on whether politicians would back his proposed budget cuts of 44 billion euros to tackle what he called the curse of the country's mounting debt. He got clarity. He was gone by Tuesday after 9 months in office in a cobbled-together minority government that's been crawling along without conviction, with a parliament in deadlock, as it has been since the election gamble by President Macron a year ago, after his centrist alliance lost ground to the far right in the European elections, seeking Clarity is the term that he used at the time too, and a direction of the nation. A hung parliament resulted, the left, the right, the centre split, and unlikely to change much according to polls in the event of French legislative elections. So critics of the government right now say the change will only come in presidential elections due in 2027 and are calling for Mr Macron to bring it forward. He hasn't. Instead, decided on Sébastien Lecornu, the Minister for the Armed Forces, as his fifth Prime Minister in 2 years. Having burned through the A's and the B's in his political address book, Attal, Born, Barnier, Bayrou, within 24 hours, Prime Minister Lecornu had set out his stall.
We will need significant breaks with the past, not just in form, not just in method, but also in substance. Not big speeches. Starting this afternoon, I will be meeting with political parties, and in the next few days, political parties and trade unions, and I will have the opportunity to speak to the French people soon.
Peter, we'll start with you. Nicolas Sarkozy's nickname, apparently a friendly nickname, was Lecornichon, the pickle for Sébastien Lecornu. So who is he? What should we know about him?
Well, he's been in Macron's governments, and we speak in the plural, since the very beginning, since 2017. He's held a variety of jobs. He's said to be very close to Macron. There's, according to one delightful story, they apparently sit in the Élysée together late into the evening, drinking whiskey and sort of chewing the cud, talking about politics and so on. Is he a Macronist? I mean, not necessarily. I think he's been described as a social Gaullist. His great hero apparently is Pierre Mesmer, who was the Minister for the Army under de Gaulle for 9 years, and then Prime Minister under Pompidou. So he's sort of, on a personal level, they clearly get on well, but he comes from a different kind of centre-right background rather than a centre-left background like Macron. So that, I think, will be interesting in how he approaches his job.
There's something peculiar, Peter was describing him, Richard, which is the fact that a lot of the TV stations have noticed a peculiar trait with him at the moment. Instead of the French kiss and greeting, that he started to be seen to gently headbutt or butt heads with other
the African
colleagues.
way, you mean?
Yes. Have you picked up on this?
Well, yes. He has a rather strange personality because he's been very much politically exposed for the last 10 years. As it was said, he was minister in all Macron governments since the beginning. He was also the mayor of Vernon, a city in Normandy. But he's not well known at all. He's not. He doesn't cultivate close relations with journalists. He is not, let's say, looking for light always. He has not been that controversial at all. There is no controversy about him. So I think he's a rather discreet figure. What keeps coming when you ask questions about him, there are 3 words. Number one, he likes people. And that may be the big difference with Macron. He likes people, he likes to talk, he likes to engage, and he's someone who really enjoys talking and trying to have a conversation. The second point is apparently feet on the ground. I mean, he knows the reality. Again, maybe a difference with Macron. He's been a mayor, he's close to the people, he likes to go to the market. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, I believe, which makes him interesting, is that he is ready to make any kind of compromise. So he doesn't have kind of limits to who to talk and to what compromise he can make. So in that type of situation, that may be the good recipe. Now, the big problem he has is that he is associated with Macron. Whatever he does, someone will figure out that Macron is behind. Macron is being very unpopular at the moment. A lot of people want to get rid of Macron. A lot of people want even him to resign, including some political party like the National Rally, the extreme right. So for Sébastien Lecornu, it's a kind of contradiction. On the one hand, he is there because Macron trusts him, but what he has to do is to forget about Emmanuel Macron. So I'm not sure he will succeed.
And Marine Le Pen talking about, touching upon your point, Richard, that, quote, that he's a symbol of continuity and the exhausted, out-of-touch policies of Macron. Having said that, when he was a minister, the far right talked about liking him. He was somebody they could deal with. They've certainly turned. Mark, I'm hearing in Brussels, one of your old stomping grounds, officials this week have put it to me that François Bayrou was principled, but he lacked charisma. And he didn't speak to anybody to negotiate over the summer. He said they were on holiday in terms of, those he could have perhaps gone on board, the Socialists, the Greens, others. the man nicknamed the pickle, Lecornichon, could he get France out of a pickle? Does he have the charismatic X factor? And does it matter?
I think for some presidents, and maybe this president, it matters more to not have charisma as a prime minister. I mean, in French we call them fusibles, don't we? The prime ministers, they're fuses that are meant to blow and deflect the heat from the presidency. I'll be very interested to sort of see if he has the capabilities in that function. What I see when I see both of these men, Bayrou outgoing and Lecornu incoming, two very ambitious characters. I mean, Bayrou, who tried for the presidency many times, and we presume he's dead and buried, but who knows in French politics, and Lecornu, who came out very young, raring, sort of conservative, socially conservative. What is he? I see that he's a reservist in the gendarme. He's very much on the right, and in a parliament that, from the elections, from what the French voted for, was largely voted towards the left. I mean, that was the biggest. It wasn't an individual party, but it was the left that largely won the election. So Macron, if we're talking about continuity, he's sticking with a sort of like a rightist strain, which perhaps doesn't quite gel with the electorate. And I think we're seeing a rise in public demonstrations, opposition. I mean, we saw it this week already. It'll be interesting to sort of see with Macron's growing impopularity how this fuse handles his position for the time that's left.
And how quickly it might explode. Amar, listening to Mark, it's worth saying two things. It's a week that's seen significant nationwide protests within 24 hours of Lecornu taking over. That was planned. The Bloc on Two movement. I just wonder what you think is driving them and driving that discontent to the extent that it is against the budget, the prescription of François Bayrou, or against the out-of-touch policies as it's seen of President Macron.
I guess his mission would be, in the budget, some things were extremely not popular at all, like taking off 2 days of holiday from the people, etc. And he kind of already said that he might change some of these very unpopular measures. So this is something. Would he be able to seduce the socialists who are a bit, they don't know exactly where to go, because we have the extreme left or the La France Insoumise by Mélenchon who can really overwhelm the Socialist Party. So they might also find some interest in going more to the center and to have some. So this will be a real challenge. But it's funny. I was looking at your the nickname that you find from Sarkozy, and it's funny because this guy, and he's been around just for 8 years at least in the government, and nobody knows at all any sense of humor. Okay? He has a lot of sense of history. He loves history. This is maybe something he shares with Macron. And he has this Gaullist fiber or fabric, but it's.
And you need it right now. Let's face it. You need a sense of humour right now, given the situation, how quickly it moves and how quickly it could swallow him up the ground underneath politically.
Let's see.
Peter, you must have kind of strategized in the last few days, kind of scenarios you're contemplating ahead.
For myself or for him?
Both.
Yes. Well, I think his basic strategy has got to be that he's got to take as his starting point the Macron bloc, those sort of allied to the Macron bloc, and he's got to gradually kind of extend it out in both directions to try and woo enough people to give him the majority he needs first and foremost to get the budget through, which I think means, I suppose, going to the socialists, trying to provide a little something symbolic for the socialists. I mean, it's interesting, I think, how the debate is moving on the so-called Zuckman law, this tax on the super rich. I don't think it's going to trouble most of us around this table, sadly, but I think it's if you've got over 100 million, I think, you'd have to pay a tax of 2% on it, and this somehow is going to solve France's economic problems, according to the proponents. Although others say actually no, all the rich people will just leave. But I think they need to do something symbolic to mark a break with the past. And I think suggesting that they might back that, and I think some of the Macron's MPs have been sort of saying warm words about that as a possibility, could be quite useful. And I mean, he's also, I think, more generally, or France more generally, has got to develop a kind of an idea of consensus within the parliament, because we're in new territory, which is very familiar to parliaments in Belgium or in Germany or in Scandinavia and whatever. But in France, you've had this tradition always of having either a president with a government with a majority in parliament, or for short periods of sort of cohabitation when the opposition has been in and had, an opposition prime minister, as it were, under the president, also with support in parliament. And what we've had since 2022, and even more so since this botched election of July last year, is a parliament with no majority, which is terra incognita for the French.
Well, that's how Macron became president. I mean, we've lost the two-party system.
It's his own fault. It's his own fault.
How do you do consensus when you're dealing with 3 or 4 blocks in parliament?
Yeah, but other countries manage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's their tradition.
Exactly.
The Fifth Republic has been built against that.
Exactly.
A quick round robin. How long is Sébastien Lecornu going to last? Place your bets now, please. Bragging rights up for grabs. Rich, I'm going to start with you. Will he take the government up until the presidential election in 2027?
No, I have my doubts. I have my doubts because the only way for him to succeed would be to manage, as it was said, to enlarge the present central bloc in the National Assembly and adding up the socialists. So he needs a truce with the socialists. But
give us a timeline. How many months are you going for?
Oh, well, I would say he will manage to pass this budget. So probably next spring. But I don't see him staying after the local election, and the local election will be in March 2026.
Mark, Liz Truss lasted less than the length of a lifespan of a lettuce. Will he outdo that?
I thought you were going to go pickle and lettuce there.
Yeah.
I'm not into prognostication. I think, the electoral calendar's one to watch, and maybe that might even shift in the next year. So,
dare to venture a date, Peter?
Well, I think next spring might be interesting only in the context, the municipal elections at the beginning of next year, but more importantly, perhaps the legal judgment on whether Marine Le Pen will actually be able to stand for election. And if that, whichever way that goes, that might change the whole electoral calculus and might lead to something next spring dramatic.
Next spring, Amar, when you're next on the programme before Christmas, are we still going to be talking about Prime Minister Lecornu?
Before Christmas, I hope, yes. But what will be really interesting in the next 2 years is that Macron won't have a new election. It's the end of his mandate. And all these parliamentaries that are Macronists, they follow him. What are they going to be? It's very interesting.
That is this week's to come.
Yes. Will they back Sébastien Lecornu, or will they not? Or will they be more independent for their own sake later?
Yes.
It's interesting.
And keep in mind that for a good sandwich in France, you need a cornichon, you need the saucisson, some kind of meat, you need the bread, and you need butter.
You need a perfect balance. Well, on there, we can end the events in France. And let's go to Utah, because it was Wednesday, just gone midday, when 31-year-old conservative activist and podcaster Charlie Kirk started taking questions in the ground of Utah Valley University at the event called the American Comeback Tour, when he challenged students at liberal-leaning colleges to prove him wrong. That was his catchphrase. Talking to them from a gazebo, trying to persuade them to support President Trump, newspapers gave him the nickname, the Pied Piper of MAGA, for his ability to appeal to the youth vote. His organisation, Turning Point, said to have been pivotal to Trump's election success, reported to have personally told Charlie Kirk that he was one of the 4 most significant figures that played a part in getting him voted in because of his reach. Well, 12 minutes after he began speaking, he was asked by someone in the crowd, do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years? Too many, he replied. After a follow-up question, there was the sound of a gunshot, then screaming as eyewitness footage of the incident showed the crowd running. Other eyewitness videos from TikTok showed the suspected sniper on a rooftop 130 metres away. He was shot in the neck and confirmed dead hours later. President Trump addressed the nation, spoke of personal grief for a close ally, and declared the Presidential Medal of Honor would be posthumously awarded, and blamed the radical left. Well, that takes us on to the alleged assassin, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, arrested. The Utah governor said a family member was involved in turning him in. Bullet casings found with inscriptions too, including "Hey Fascist, catch," we're told. Richard, this has dominated global news for 24 hours. You reported from the US recently. Give me your sense of how you'd weigh up the magnitude of this moment.
Well, unfortunately, I think we are not surprised. I mean, the climate in the US has been so polarized, so radicalized these recent months that something like this could happen anytime. I mean, when you see the way the police, the anti-immigration squad, the ICE, they act in the US. So I'm not saying that it was for him to be killed or someone else. I'm just saying that the climate was so intense that the fire is burning. And once the fire is burning, then you may have that type of murders happening in a country which, by the way, is used to political assassination. It's nothing new in the US. So I think that's very, number one, unfortunate, and number two, is going probably to push Trump again further in organizing his police actions or in the campus, in the university. So there is, at the moment in the US, I was talking yesterday with a friend who is a university professor, and she's saying that on her own campus, she's a professor, not a student, there is a climate of fear. And they have even a request from the chancellor of the university not to use some words in their email, not to attract attention from the government, from the administration. So this climate of fear can lead to those type of action. No surprise, unfortunately.
Peter, I'm going to ask you in a moment the legacy of Charlie Kirk, what he did for the MAGA movement. I want to first just take a look at Charlie's work. This is what he became known for, debating with people since dropping out of college at 18, getting into political activism. This is an example of him debating. That was considered his real skill. Winning over young conservatives. This was from a series on YouTube called Surrounded. Many might know it. 32 million people watched this clip. Basically, the format pitches 20 or 25 people against one person in a debate. Red flags come up if that person has lost the debate. This one was on the issue of whether trans women are women.
So if that happened right now, it would be a woman.
So
once a person makes the decision to identify as a woman,
got it. No,
they're a woman.
That's a separate issue. What is a woman?
That's the definition.
No, I know, but you have to tell me what.
A person who identifies themselves as a woman.
But you have how do you know that they are that thing?
How do I don't need to know what they are. I can ask them if I want to know.
But there needs to be, you need to tell me what that thing is, though.
Somebody who, okay, sorry, we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting anywhere.
Well, no, it's important because it's like saying a giraffe is a thing that looks like a giraffe, or a coyote is a thing that looks like a coyote. It's called circular reasoning. You have to give me a actual definition.
I don't have to, I did give you a definition.
No, you said that a woman is something that thinks they're a woman. That doesn't give me a definition. That's simply...
What would you consider a definition then?
An adult female with XX chromosomes.
No, I mean like what makes that a definition?
It's worth saying, Peter, the anger, the grief that many people say actually this was Trump appearing at his most kind of emotionally raw in his speech about it, was what this man had done, Charlie Kirk, in his debating skills being seen everywhere, and a testament to that 32 million views for just that one clip on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, he was extraordinarily successful and also became extraordinarily rich, I think, through his efforts. One shouldn't forget that. I mean, there's a lot of monetizing of what he did. And I mean, as we saw in that clip there, it was essentially, he was a great debater. He would sort of argue his way clearly out of anything. He would take on the other side. And you know, that was part of his appeal. I mean, particularly to young people. I think it's interesting. It's not just in the US, but it's also in Europe, across the world, I suppose, that young people, you know, there was a traditional idea that young people are traditionally left-leaning. And these days, no, they're not. A lot of them are, but another lot of them are right-leaning, particularly in the United States. And he kind of tapped into that, and he fed that, and started doing it at an extraordinarily early age. Before the age of 20, he set up his organization, Turning Point USA, which has got branches. I was surprised to hear they even have a branch in Britain. They have a number of branches, I'm sure, elsewhere as well. And it's just an extraordinary facet of the MAGA movement, I think.
Mark, it's just continuing from Peter's thought, it tapped into something outside of the US as well, that the fact that there was a movement in the UK, he debated at Oxford University as well, he'd been here in France, travelling around. There's been kind of an emotion on the right, because he's been seen as a divisive, controversial figure, particularly with the left, on some of his polemic views on, as we saw with trans, or with its Martin Luther King, for example, which he talked about later, saying that he became this mythical figure that was he disliked in the end. What do you think that's trying to get the crux of what he offered to MAGA that they didn't have before? What's your take on that?
First of all, journalists aren't expert on everything, and I can't say that I'm a big expert on him, and I had to look up a lot of stuff this week when it happened.
It's a key point, actually. A lot of people under 30 straight away were alerted to this.
I was aware of the name and vaguely him, but I really had to dive into it this week with all the stories that were happening. I don't know. You want my hot little take? I think that he's able to verbalize, to really set out in a very clear oral manner, a lot of thoughts that Donald Trump would like to be able to say if he could string sentences together that well. I think that is a big thing. It was interesting. I think J.D. Vance said that he didn't just help get Donald Trump elected to a new term, but he helped populate the government, essentially. He helped sort of the people in key positions. I mean, along with Laura Loom, and sort of, I think he was just another indicator to me of how Trump is determined to break with the normal pillars of what you would consider POTUS, the president, to rely on in decision-making and be swayed by people who are able to get their points across almost like influencers on social media.
And to which, as an influence on social media, just also the imagery of this, which is you scroll any of your socials and it's just dominating a lot of stuff that's fake news as well. Amar, your take here, because we spoke after the shooting, the assassination attempt on President Trump, the imagery of this, of that, which became arguably one of the images of our times and a potential factor in his re-election. As a photojournalist looking at that and the imagery of these events playing out on social media, what's your takeaway, the consequences of it being so immediately visible?
First, I mean, I haven't seen an image that was as much as for Trump's attack. But what shocked me or what surprised me was it was very fast or very quick that Trump accused the radical left while the inquiry was just beginning. While we all know that some kind of shooting or political assassination in the U.S., I remember the assassination attempt of President Reagan, for instance, or something like that. And sometimes they're just weirdo who have no political message, who are just want to be famous or want to be known or something like that, want to achieve something. So it was extremely fast for the President of the United States of America to announce that. And also I totally agree with you about the fact that it's the radicalization of the speeches and the fact that if you shout in a university campus, you get expelled from the university or you get arrested or you get deported, etc. Well, at some point, yeah, it takes us here and we don't want to go here.
Amar, thank you. To Tuesday this week, another huge story, the tiny Gulf state of Qatar, key mediator in trying to bring an end to the conflict in Gaza. It was 4 in the afternoon in Doha, 3 o'clock here in Paris, when we saw strange reports coming through of fighter jets flying above an upscale area called West Bay Lagoon, close to the international embassies and consulates. A residential compound had been struck. We now know Israel had for the first time carried out airstrikes. A supposed safe zone on the Hamas negotiating team in Doha. Its chief negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, was due to meet that day with Qatar's Prime Minister to give a response to a new US-led ceasefire deal. He survived the attack, we're told. 5 Hamas members were killed, as well as a Qatari security official. And Qatar's Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, spoke of deep betrayal, state terrorism, and of Israel crossing every red line. His usual diplomatic restraint gone, blaming Benjamin Netanyahu for killing any hope, he said, for the hostages in Gaza and undermining any chance of peace.
He's breaking every law. He broke every international law. He's starving people in Gaza. He's doing all these rogue actions in the entire region. What's next? What's next for him?
There has been heavy condemnation across Europe and the Gulf too. The US said it knew of the attack in advance. The Israeli fighter jets reported to have flown past the US military base, Al Udeid, as they carried out the targeted killing. In the days leading up to the strikes, Israel officials had briefed families of hostages that of the 20 captives kept alive by Hamas and affiliates in Gaza, the condition of 2 of them were so grave they were close to death. We'll also talk about what's been going on and happening on the ground in Gaza and Jerusalem too this week in a moment. But first, let's look at what happened in Doha. With you first, Amar. What's your understanding of what Israel's objective was, and ultimately who was killed, and the effects you think it's going to have on peace talks?
Well, the objectives were clear. I mean, there's nobody hiding about them. Who was really killed, I have no idea, because we're not there. We don't have any. I just noticed that none of the people who are supposed to be killed didn't appear later on, as usually they do, to say, I'm here, all is fine. There's a video, there is a. I'm at the funeral. We haven't seen for the moment anything like this. But to see a bit bigger picture, it's interesting how Netanyahu managed in just this one raid of few seconds, how he managed to totally change the position of the Gulf states who were Israeli fans. I mean, we didn't hear them a lot talking about Gaza. We didn't see them expelling embassies or things like that. And then suddenly, Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the Emirates, went straight to Doha to express his solidarity, while they used to be foes and they used to hate each other. So it was very interesting how they got united. And I believe that maybe the biggest fear for the Gulf states was Iran. And now that Iran is very much weakened, they could be really worried from Israel, I mean, who is doing things like that on their soil.
And it's worth saying, Richard, listening to Amar, this is not some underground Mossad operation. We're talking about 10 fighter jets dropping munitions. I saw the Times of Israel said this week. It was a bold move, that Israeli leaders are not overly worried about the criticism. They have room to manoeuvre, he said, given the US position. The flight path, the Al Udeid air base, clearly the US would need to know.
Well, look at the scale of events. You have this strike on Doha. You have now Netanyahu calling for more colonies from more Jewish colony in order to cut the Palestinian territories into two, so there cannot be a Palestinian state. So it proves that Netanyahu, at the moment, believes that nothing can stop him. Certainly not the US, certainly not Donald Trump, certainly not Europe, who cannot do anything. So he's he's really trying to achieve as much as possible as the winner of this war, though in Gaza situation is absolutely horrible. It is a tragedy. It is something that weighs on the reputation of Israel, but he wants to appear as the person who finally got rid of Iran, got rid of the Palestinians, got rid of Hamas, and in a way it's becoming completely messianic, and he will go to the end of it. And I'm afraid on that way there will be more dead, more victims, more violation of international law, but he doesn't care. And we've got a prime minister of Israel who simply doesn't care about the rest of the world.
Peter, just listening to Richard, the Qataris are our strategic partner or ally of the US. Going back to the rhetoric of Benjamin Netanyahu, he's talked about, his foreign minister talked about there's nowhere to hide for Hamas. And according to Axios, Qatar is reviewing its security partnership now. It's saying it's a betrayal by Washington and considering other security partners. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the position of America in this is obviously key. What are they going to do? As far as I understand, the Qatari Prime Minister, also the Foreign Minister, is on his way to Washington to talk to the Americans, presumably to vent his displeasure. I mean, it's significant. I think it was a resolution at the Security Council. America was among, it was unanimously passed by all 15 members, including America. So until now, they've effectively given, or Trump has effectively given Netanyahu carte blanche to zap, to strike out at enemies in surrounding countries. But, you know, has Israel or has Netanyahu just gone one step too far this time? And I think things will become a lot clearer in the next few days in terms of the American response.
Well, let's just take a look at, as well as what's going on outside of Doha in Gaza too. Developments this week. The destruction of Gaza City continued. The Israeli Prime Minister spoke of how IDF planes had levelled 50 high-rise buildings in 2 days. Terror towers, he called them, as around 1 million Palestinians told to flee once again to the south to an expanded, quote, safe zone called Al-Mawasi. Then in Jerusalem on Monday, 2 Palestinian gunmen carried out a mass attack at a bus stop. 6 people were killed there, the most serious attack in the city for decades. And Mark, European governments, it seems, cannot agree whether there's a genocide in Gaza right now. We saw the Spanish government, Pedro Sanchez, saying it was a genocide this week. And a legal advice from David Lammy, who was Foreign Secretary in the UK till last week, says this. He clarified the government position that there was no conclusive proof that a genocide is taking place. But that's interesting in itself, isn't it? Because not too long ago, you and I were talking on this programme about how European leaders said they would seek clarity from the International Court of Justice. They wouldn't be given this kind of rhetoric.
I think European governments aren't going to agree on something like this with the other political stakes at risk. I mean, Britain, for instance, the special relationship with the US obviously has to tread very carefully when it comes to throwing a word like genocide around. Spain traditionally, has recognized a Palestinian state well before France and so on did, so their position was fairly clear. Then you're looking at others like Italy. I mean, Germany is the one that moves the dial because, for obvious historic reasons. Now, it's pretty clear that the Europeans aren't going to agree on this, and perhaps would prefer something like the International Court of Justice to make a decision on what South Africa has brought forward. Just going back to Qatar and everything, though, what strikes me, I mean, looking at Israel's attack on Qatar, that's what it was, is, I just think about the same way that Israel attacked Iran and was able, through that, to bounce Trump into something he said fairly clearly he didn't want to do. And in the end, he embraced the turnaround. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Trump in Qatar just a few months ago saying the US is here to protect you? Well, obviously not from a closer ally when it goes like this. So I don't know about carte blanche from Trump. I think Netanyahu's strategy is he's got an opportunity now with Trump in the White House to, in a way, almost outmaneuver Trump, to bounce him into things that Trump particularly doesn't want to do. But when it comes down to it, and when you're talking about, like, also thinking about an evangelical base that votes for Trump and, is very, pro-Greater Israel and so on in the way they look at things, I think the considerations that Trump has, I think Netanyahu, who also risks prison if wars ever stop, I think he sees an opportunity to reshape the Middle East in a way that may well benefit his legacy or not, but he only has this opportunity now with the structure of the White House.
Mark, it is a good place to end it as well. Thank you to all our distinguished panel tonight. Thanks to Amar Abed-Rabot, renowned photographer and French Knight of Arts and Letters, to Peter Conradi, Europe editor of the Sunday Times, author of Who Lost Russia, The King's Speech and Hitler's Piano Player, to Mark Burley, foreign correspondent, seasoned for AFP, and to Richard Worley, Europe correspondent and columnist for the Swiss-German publisher Blick, and the author of The Ball of Illusion, What France Believes and What the World Sees. Thank you for watching in a week that France said goodbye to François Bayrou, voted out of political office, and the music world said goodbye to Rick Davies, lead singer of Supertramp, who died aged 81 on Monday. Born in Swindon when he first broke through in the 70s, his mother said it was a good job he made it because music is the only thing at school he was any good at. Turns out that's all he needed. Goodbye, stranger. It's been nice. We'll see you in 7 days for The World Next Week.